Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to helping business owners prepare for exit so you can maximize value and exit on your terms. This is the Exit Insights podcast presented by Succession Plus. I'm Daryl Bates-Brownsword, and today I'm talking to Andy Cristin. Now, Andy's got a great story because he's met that gold standard. He's been involved in a growing business and exited without that golden handshake or earn-out period. So welcome, Andy. Thanks for joining me today. I'm sure the listeners are keen to hear your story.
Well, thanks, Daryl. Thanks for inviting me on. Yeah, I'm an accountant, and I've been a finance director for many businesses for a long time. But I got an opportunity to get involved in a small business, had a small equity share, and it was quite a roller coaster ride, quite a quick ride. We set it up, built it up to £1 million in profit, and we'd sold it within 5 years. So it was an interesting experience.
Sounds like the sort of story that a lot of owners want to create, and it always sounds nice and easy to do, but it's not always easy to create. There must be some secrets. Did you guys have any sort of business training or qualifications? Is there any special secrets that led you guys to be able to achieve that story?
Yeah, I think the secret sauce, as it were, is that the entrepreneur, the guy that I worked alongside and the majority shareholder, David, he'd done this before. So he'd done it, I think, at least twice before that I know of. So when it came to this opportunity, we actually had two other businesses in the same sort of sector, and we set up this claims management business in a specific area, very niche, only probably 20 potential clients worldwide, and we did everything right. We set it up as a business with both of us not involved in the day-to-day. We had someone write a system to make it to automate the process, something that most of our competitors hadn't done. We put together a group of, I suppose, 4 people, the main board. We were 2 of them, but we got 2 other people who were specialists with 20 years plus experience in the business. And we went in with some good prices. We aimed to make some money out of it. I think that's probably the recipe. Easier said than done, but easier done if you've done it before.
Yeah. So I think you rattled off. You almost went through the checklist. One of the checklists that we use for examining and assessing whether a business is exit ready or not. And it's worth going through those. I think one of the things you mentioned was you're in a niche. So, it's easy to stand out, it's easy to add value and to convey your value when you do something special and unique, and you're not trying to do everything for everyone. So there's a nice lesson for us.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key. I think that's where, a lot of businesses that I see, because I'm a part-time finance director, I get involved with a few SMEs, and often I don't get involved in them because they don't set themselves up correctly. They're trying to do too many things, trying to spread too wide. It's a massive mistake. Your people don't understand what you're doing in enough detail to do it well. You can't build a system because you need 6 or 7 systems, and you can't ask people for good revenue. You can't ask top prices if you're not specialists. So
if you're just another player, you're in the middle by definition, and if anything, that puts down the lower end of the pricing, and which means you need to build your factory or your business to suit. It needs to be high volume, low unit profit, just to stay in the game.
Sure. Yeah.
You've mentioned, one of the other things you said is that the key player had done it before, so they knew the journey. Always a big help. Most people don't have that behind them. So let's skip that one and go on to some of the other areas where you identified, process, if you like. You mentioned systems. You've said that a couple of times, and automation. What exactly do you mean by systems? What are systems? It's something that slips off the tongue really easily. And I hear people talk about it, but let's explore it in a bit more depth this time around. What is it? What is a system?
Yeah, I mean, in different businesses, it can mean lots of different things, I suppose. I mean, for us, simple things like, a little bit of work that I wanted my team to do, I just video it on Loom and save it on a shared drive so that people could, go back and check how they were going to do it. Anybody that was new coming on board could go and have a look at the videos and see how to do that particular task, do it correctly. We had lots of flow charts, a couple of Visio experts who would, chart the processes. I mean, one of the things we had to do, we in the operations was actually making bank payments. We were paying people all over the world, and there's all sorts of ways that could go wrong. So actually writing down how these things worked so that people could always come back to that, that was important. But the main thing was a system, an online web portal for people to make claims on, so that they could go online and they could type in all the details themselves, upload photographs, upload estimates, because before that they were sort of emailing them in, and we were having to do all that inputting ourselves. So I mean, it saved us a load of time, a load of double entry, errors. Yeah, I mean, that was a big game changer, that online system.
So I think I heard two things there, Andy. So one of them was we had one way of doing things, one workflow. So we documented it and in a nice simple form, like a flow chart, or workflow and flow charts with Visio. So it was really clear and obvious to everyone, step by step by step. Here's the way we do things. You don't make it up as you go along. You don't do it different every time. Everyone does it the same way. So that means that as we grow and we've got more people doing the same process, we can control it. The other thing I heard is that you had training in each of those steps, and I love modern use of technology. You just used, Loom?
Yeah.
Or a video. So you just had a video recording of what screenshots and as you were moving around the screen, and here's how to do it. So if you're stuck, so people will probably, when they're learning the process for the first time, they're using the video side by side. As they get more familiar, I'm not sure if you said this, but checklist, just to have some sort of confirmation that, oh yeah, there's a quick reminder, yeah, bang, 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 done it. And training so that everyone knew exactly the same way. So there was one half of things. And then the other half, I think I heard you say, was, we've got the internal training, and then from the external system perspective, we had some automation and software, which reduced a whole lot of our manual handling and duplication and saved us a whole lot of time and gave us consistency. So I'm guessing that's where some of your real IP and competitive advantage in both sides, but you are looking at the systems for not just one side, but both sides, customer experience as well as team experience. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah, and just it's just consistency, isn't it? Saving time, having the same result every time, just makes the business a lot more easy.
Yeah. So can you give us some concept? How many people were in your business?
50 at the end. Yeah.
So it's a nice small business.
Yeah.
And how do you know what level of detail to document to, so you get that balance right between telling people how to suck eggs and having not being overly prescriptive, so it makes it less enjoyable to do. But how do you get that balance right, and especially in a small business like that when you've got limited resources to do this type of work?
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned checklists there. So we had a checklist for invoices, because the claim would obviously end up in an invoice that we'd have to pay. And if I remember right, he had 13 points on this checklist. So if you're the person in our business receiving the invoice, you've got to check 13 points and tick them off and make sure that it's correct before you put it on the system. Otherwise, you've got to reject it, send it back, and get it corrected. So yeah, it'd be pretty boring, wouldn't it, to go through the checklist every time, especially if you're doing, I don't know, say half a dozen a day, maybe. But that's not the point. The checklist's there. People probably know what they're looking for after a while. They get used to it. But if they want to go back and check it, if they get a strange one, they just want to be absolutely sure what the wording was on point 6, they can go back and check it. And of course, if you've got new people starting, they're going to rely on those things more. So they're there. And it doesn't take someone like me wasting time, going through stuff like that. The Loom videos particularly saved me a lot of time in showing people how to do things over and over again, because it was do it once, record it once, and it's there for the duration then.
Yeah. And there's a record of what was trained, because you're going, well, here's evidence.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned that you've got checklists there. So for someone doing a checklist every day, or following the process 5 or 6 times every day, it's just a reminder, because you can get in autopilot mode. And I guess so it's also useful for the people who are only doing it once a week, once a month. They're going, look, I don't need to do the whole training again, but I don't need to watch the video, but I just need a reminder. Oh yeah, that's right. I've got to do that step, that step, that step. Yeah, got it. And if I'm only doing it once a week. Okay. So we've got systems, we've got processes. I think you said you also had an external board members. How did you know when to bring on external people into the board, and what value did they add?
No, we didn't really have external board members. Not when we were setting it up. David covered sort of the operations, the sales, and the MD base to start with, and I was the finance director. We had those roles even when there's just the 2 of us. We sort of set it up as a proper business even before we had any turnover. But once we started to get some traction and got some decent sized clients, we took on somebody in the ops role and took on someone in the sales role, and we actually started off with most people were contractors when we were small. We were probably lucky in that way, that people were available that we knew in the industry who were good, and so they came on as contractors, sometimes not even full time. And then when we got a bit bigger, they were made up to full time employees, and they are now running the business.
Okay, so and I think you mentioned to me earlier that before we started recording that you stayed on once the business was sold, stayed on as the FD. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, I stayed on. In fact, I'm still there till the end of this month. A few years afterwards. We sold on the day, and we were paid on the day. There was no earn out or anything like that, as you mentioned before, I think. But yeah, I stayed on as a consultant, and it was our baby, and you get attached to these things. But I've sort of got to the point now, I think, I need to move on and do something else. But it was great, but quite a different change in culture. We sold to a large French multinational. I think got 60,000 employees. So we were a drop in the ocean. Changing the way of doing things. Decisions didn't get made so quickly. It was a lot more bureaucratic. For good reason. I can understand why.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, very, very, very different. So I'm looking forward to going back to some more entrepreneurial businesses now.
Okay, so you've gone from a 50-person business to a 60,000 person business. I imagine the level of detail in terms of documentation, process control, training was at another level.
Yeah, not really, to be honest. I think we were making good profits, and they kind of let us go. If we hadn't have been, I imagine there'd have been a lot more intervention. But I think we're such a small business. The important people within the office in Paris had their eyes on bigger fish. Okay. They got. I think one of the reasons why they bought us was to get into our market. And they didn't really ever follow that through. So there was an element that we were sort of left alone a bit, really.
Okay, so is that what was attractive to them, to get into the market, or do you think there was something else that led them to acquiring you as opposed to someone else?
I think the reason that they wanted us initially was because we were in the automotive market and we had a couple of particularly big clients that they thought that they could supply their services to if they got involved with our relationships and extrapolated from there. But I don't think they ever did, really. I certainly haven't heard that.
Right. Okay. So for some of the listeners, can you take us through what the journey was like from the beginning of the, let's call it the exit process? I'm guessing, how did that happen? Were you approached? Did you go to market? Can you talk us through that side of the journey?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, David had a relationship with this business, and he, from quite, I don't know, a few years before, there was a talk of them buying us out, and I can't really remember what the catalyst was now, but it came to a point. I think maybe it was we'd grown it to a certain level, and the questions were asked. I think I can't remember how many years he'd been going there. Not that many. But yeah, he started a conversation. There was interest on their side. We didn't actually, we broke one of the cardinal rules, really. We didn't get that competitive tension. We didn't really talk to anybody else. Reason being that they were interested and the multiple was good. So, you know, we didn't feel that we wanted to go down that route and risk, you know, the offer that we had. It still took over a year to go through the process. They had quite a professional bid team, a mergers and acquisitions team. So, you know, it was David and I dealing with a team of lawyers and accountants and people who were dealing with, I don't know, half a dozen different purchases at the same time, or potential purchases at the same time. Yeah, it was an interesting process, but they were actually very professional. So, you know, they gave us a list of things they wanted. We set up a Dropbox file with all the sort of due diligence documentation and a few visits to Paris for, you know, discussions with them, but really mainly just questions by email. And it didn't take us a lot of, well, it didn't take me a lot of time in terms of, it didn't give me lots of work to do. I know David did have a lot of work to do, and it's quite important that we had other people running the business at that stage because he was involved a lot. Yeah, no, for me, they asked questions, we answered them, and then we didn't hear much for a week or six, and there'd been a few questions. And then eventually they got to a point where they finalized the offer, and we had a date, and we had to get our lawyers and accountants involved. Very important to, you know, have those professionals involved at that stage. And yeah, contract was made up, and an offer was agreed.
So what support did you guys have on your side to help you with the process and the transaction?
We had a top 20 firm of accountants who'd been involved with us for some time, and it wasn't just a single, it wasn't a direct share ownership. So there was another company involved that owned the shares. So it was a little bit more complicated than it might otherwise have been. But yeah, so they were involved, and they had a solicitor that they used for these sort of transactions, which made it easier for us because the two firms knew each other. It was fairly light touch, really, I think. I would imagine. I've never been involved in any other sale apart from that one, but didn't seem to be too complicated.
Okay. And your role as an FD, we often hear the importance of the FD being involved in the transaction. What were the requirements of yourself and your skill set?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was something that David wanted, and he knew from his previous experience that, you know, I think people often leave it too long to get an FD, and even if it's a part-time FD, you know, they leave it too long. And they get more value if they got someone in earlier. Yeah. But I was in from the start. I mean, I was there before we even had the company set up. We always had monthly management accounts, you know, full accounts and analysis of profit and contracts, you know, the different contractual profits. forecasts, looking forward, cash flow. I mean, we actually bootstrapped it from pretty much nothing. Initially, we put in a little bit of capital for the shares, but we never had any loans. So keeping a tight eye on what cash was required. Also making sure that the clients paid some of the money up front, to make sure that it worked. Again, that was something that I think he learned from previous experience. But I made sure it happened.
So there's always that value, isn't it? I think, from what I've seen in the marketplace, it's that transition required for entrepreneurs to move from gut feel, let's call it financial management, to bring in someone with some key expertise and really analyzing the finance function and all of the numbers and turn it from backward looking to forward looking to help you make better decisions and informed, timely decisions.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, often, I think you've mentioned it before. I've heard you talking about the £1 million sort of problem. You get a business to about £1 million, and it's an adolescent, isn't it? It's got to grow up. Yeah. And finance is definitely an element that needs to change quite significantly, often in that sort of business. So you need to put together a model. You need to understand, what are the profit drivers? How does your net profit work, but how does your gross profit work? If you've got different parts to your business, are they all contributing the same amount, or would you be better off just concentrating on one particular area, which is often the way? And how do you forecast that forwards? How could you grow it? What does that mean for the cash as well? If you might think, okay, let's grow this quickly, but are you going to run out of cash if you do it? So you need some good models. Looking forward, and that's where your FD does come in, I think.
Yeah, look, any business I know who's brought in an FD on a part-time basis as an ambitious business owner, the earlier they bring them in, the happier they are. They're more in control, they feel, of their growth process. So yeah, it's an important role, isn't it? Andy, based on your experience, you've been through the process now. You've hung on for a couple, a while longer after the process. You stayed on as an extra decision. You've seen the changes in the business. Well, from your experience, what tips would you give business owners, getting ready to go on the change and start to think about it?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, think about your exit as soon as you can. If you haven't thought about it already, start now. Exits come in different shapes and sizes. You might not be selling like we did, but you've got to put a business into a good position where it doesn't rely on you. You can't start thinking about that too early, I don't think. You sort of skipped over the fact that one of the reasons that we've done quite well, I think, was because of David's initial experience, having done all this before. I mean, obviously, most people can't suddenly get that sort of experience, but you can go and buy it. You can go and talk to people early on who've done this before. I'll give you David's number if you want. I'm sure it should be available for the odd phone call. But yeah, no, there's lots of people around who can help you, who've been through it, and can help you structure the business early on in the right way, and stop you making going down the wrong road, which can be quite expensive.
Absolutely. If one of the things that we talk about is you need to get that switch, switch the mindset from purely revenue growth to asset growth. Start thinking about the business from an asset perspective, and how a buyer or an acquirer will start looking at your business, and then you can start putting those systems, processes, structures, whatever you need to do in place just to make the transaction easier. You mentioned that, even though you only had one acquirer that you were talking to, it still took a year for the process to occur. And that's one of the big things for business owners is to realize that it's still going to take about a year for the deal to be done. It's a lot more complicated than buying a house. And if you don't have all of your ducks in a row and everything all sorted, it could take longer than a year, but it sounds like you guys did okay in terms of the demand during that year. a lot of people who have gone through the process talk and tell the story about how much work it actually took during the process and how much discipline it was required to keep their eyes on the ball and driving the business and keeping the business growing, and without this distraction. Because the ones that you hear, get distracted, the business actually devalues during the process if they don't have it running smoothly. And there's just an additional advantage for business owners to not be required in the business on a day-to-day basis, because if they're not required to run the business, they're going to take a whole lot of their time in doing this sort of work and getting the business through the process. And that's not going to be a detriment to the business, the running of the business operationally.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think if you're trying to find the right buyer, and you're starting off with half a dozen or so interested parties who might not be that interested, and some of them are competitors, and you're a bit worried about what you're going to tell them and what their objective really is in the process. It's a lot more to do than we had. We just had one person who wasn't a competitor. They seemed to have a genuine reason to be interested. And yeah, it never fell off the rails. It was a process. It took a long time, but it just went through the different steps and got to the end. So I'm sure we were quite lucky in that situation.
So Andy, you've been sharing how good and how pain-free the process was almost for you guys. You must have got something wrong.
Relatively pain-free. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we got it wrong, but obviously we went against the general advice in not having competitive tension. So maybe we would have got a better multiple if we had. We got a multiple significantly better than the sort of average range that you read about. Yeah, I mean, a couple of years later, the business did have a much better year. So if we'd have hung on for 2 years, we'd have made a load more money. Remember talking to David on that day. Yeah, we talked about what might have been, but you don't know what's going to happen though, do you? Because I can remember being there. Shall we do it? Shan't we do it? This is the offer. It was a big number, more so for him than for me. But we could have lost one of our big contracts the next week. I mean, they were long-term contracts, so they wouldn't have happened. But we couldn't have known that 2 years' time we'd have had a much better profit. It was just one of those things. It's
like trying to predict the stock market, isn't it? Like,
oh yeah,
hindsight's wonderful.
Yeah.
So look, Andy, just trying to pull it all together. One of the things I ask all of my guests on the podcast is, what's the one piece of information that you really want people to take away from this conversation? Wrap it up with kind of the best piece of advice you've ever received. What's the big message from our conversation today?
I'm an accountant, so I think I'd say, know your numbers, like really know your numbers. So understand your profit and loss account, certainly, but also, educate yourself as to valuation, of businesses. What are the things that your business needs to do to maximize its profit multiple ratio, if that's the way you're going to sell it? And that's the way, a lot of them are valued. That's how ours was valued.
So I'm going to dig into that. I normally leave it there, but I'm going to dig into that because you do have a finance background. We hear a lot of people say, know your numbers, and it's almost feels like a throwaway line, but I think you just started to give a little bit of an insight as to what that really means. So when you say know your numbers, you said know your profit, know what your valuation is, from a buyer's perspective, what is a realistic valuation, from the market, not what you want it to be worth or you hope it to be worth. What else do you mean as an FD when you say to a business owner, you've got to know your numbers? What does that mean? What's behind your profit? I think, what are the volumes? What are your rates if it's a volume rate sort of mechanism? For example, I deal with a firm of architects, so their key numbers are, they've got a group of people who are very relatively expensive, and they're trying to corral that sort of knowledge and that resource to bring them in a revenue.
So what are the key things? It's how many hours are available. So that's a multiple of, how many hours there are in a week, but also how many hours, how many of those hours are actually spent earning money, which is probably only about 65% of the time. And what's the hourly rate that they're actually achieving? Not what you think they're achieving when you estimate it, but have a look back afterwards. If you've got an hour recording system, and find out, on that project, what was the number of hours, and therefore what was the hourly rate, and if it was 20 quid, go back and find out why. Make sure you understand the things that go wrong and learn from them. Go back to the numbers. Why it might be that there's a big problem on a job, and for some reason a lot of drawings had to be redone, for example, in the architect's example. Really understand those things. A lot of people, they don't want to go back and look at the mistakes. They don't want to look at the projects that went wrong. And yet, you can learn so much from them and avoid making the mistakes again. It's a big part of improving your profit.
Yeah, so more than just knowing your revenue, it's knowing where your profit comes from and what's driving the profit, and so you can get to know about the future of the business. Yeah,
because not all revenue is good revenue. I mean, a lot of people think it is, but if you can see behind it, split it out. That was that project. Oh, great, we made 50% margin on that one. That was that project. It was the same revenue, and oh yeah, we lost the 50 quid on that one. Why not? Don't do it. Don't do it again.
Thanks, Andy. That's been very helpful. You've shed some light on a whole lot of areas for us. Really appreciate your time today. What I'll do is on the show notes, we'll put some contact details, how people can find you. But you're now working, using your experiences in a portfolio career, helping a number of people or a number of businesses with what you achieved.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and enjoying it. It's good fun.
All the best, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.